Oh, there it goes. All right. Hello, everyone. Hi, Sharon. How are you today?
I'm well. How are you, Dori?
I'm doing well. And I apologize for anyone who was watching just a few minutes ago. We tried to get on and we're just learning things. This is brand new. So we are back on and ready to go this time. So let me introduce myself and you real quick, Sharon. I'm Dori Durbin. I'm a wife, a mom, a children's book author. And I also recently have finished up another book, Sharon. So,
Yay.
yay. So, and this is Sharon Eagen. Sharon has lots of hats. She's a professionally certified educational therapist, a cognitive coach, a Feurenstien trainer. She also founded the Cognitive Link, and she's a wife and mom too. So, welcome, Sharon.
And a grandma. And a grandma.
And grandma.
That's the really important. That's the thing you got to remember, the grandma.
This is true. And I know this for sure from you. So that's awesome. That's awesome. So, Sharon, you and I have chatted a tiny bit before, but we all have experienced how COVID has affected us in a lot of ways. Our younger kids, especially, have had, it's no exception for them. And I know that parents are super concerned about their kids' health and well-being. So as parents, we tend to kind of restrict them a little bit more as far as taking risks.
Mm-hmm.
And what I wondered was, are we doing it too much? Are we not allowing our kids to take positive risks? And what does that do to them as far as their well-being and even their cognitive development? So that's a huge question. So, so I'll break it down just into one question to start with. So if we talk about positive risks, maybe what is a positive risk and what's the difference between that and, let's say, like a challenge that they might experience?
I think that's a really good question. It may seem a little like semantics, right? It's a challenge, it's a positive risk, but I think there's a significant difference. I think when we talk about taking a positive risk, it's coming from within. When we talk about accepting a challenge, I think of that as something that comes, excuse me, outside of ourselves. And it has more to do with someone offering us this opportunity. So when I think of a positive risk being internal, it's that I want to do something. I'm not really sure how it might go, but I have this idea and I think I want to take a chance, right? And this shouldn't be confused with risky behaviors, okay? That's a whole different conversation. But a positive risk is we're taking a chance. It might not go well, and that's what makes it a risk, right? Is that it might not go well. And an example might be a child wants to audition for a musical production or a theater production, right? But they're really afraid to sing in front of people. So they're going to take a risk. If they follow through with that, that's a positive risk, but it's a risk, right? It might not go well. When you think about accepting a challenge, that's more external. I think it comes from someone else or a different context. Kind of that idea like somebody thinks I could do something, and that outside source usually has a good sense of it. They have my best interest at heart, but it's coming from without. An example might be a parent telling a child, you should go out for the soccer team. I've been watching you in the backyard, and I think you could do it. I think you should go out for the soccer team. Now, one isn't better than the other necessarily, but it comes from a different place. I think our kids need both of those. That all of those opportunities for challenge can't come from without themselves. They need to learn to listen to their own voice. And so I think that taking a positive risk is more internal. A challenge comes more external.
Yeah, and you said neither one was necessarily a bad thing or necessarily a better situation, right?
Right. Absolutely. Our kids need both. We need both, right? We need people to challenge us, but we also need to learn to listen to our voice. That's saying, hey, you want this, you could go for this.
I always think of when kids are, especially when they're real little. I remember mine going to play groups, for instance, and that was a long time ago, but we would walk in and they would literally press their bodies into my legs to try to avoid having to make any effort to meet people.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I know with COVID, that's made things a little bit more complicated. But I think the issue is still there, that they don't feel internally confident enough to reach out and actually, talk to another kid that they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so this kind of like the positive risk part of things, right? Because if I challenged them and said, hey, I bet you can't meet 3 new friends today,
Right.
that might be good for some kids, but might be really frustrating and terrible for another kid.
Right, exactly. And it can really lead to, I think, come from a different emotional place. Kids want to please parents, right? And so if a parent says, hey, I bet you can't, or hey, you should try, and they don't succeed at that, that can be very devastating for some kids.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we have to ask our kids, what do they want? What do they think they could do? What would they like to try? And I think that's where that positive risk is a little bit of a flip on that idea of trying to push and challenge our kids. There's a place for it, and I think there's a way to do that, but I think we have to be careful emotionally how we present that.
So, from the development side of things, let's say our kids are hesitant to take positive risks. They don't feel that. What are some benefits that they're going to get from doing, kind of trying something out like that?
Mm-hmm. I think one of the biggest benefits is they can begin to learn to trust their voice, to trust themselves, and to grow in that independence. So we know as parents, that's what our job is to raise them to be independent. And for those of us who are at that phase where our kids have grown and gone, that's a very bittersweet time. But we don't want them in our basement. So it's important. So I think emotionally, one of the big benefits there is that they begin to trust themselves and they begin to grow in that independence. The key word we hear, or the buzzword we hear right now a lot, is resilience. Mm-hmm. Going through this COVID time, and it's a time of challenge. And resilience is the idea that we can go through something hard and come out in a positive way. We can come back from it in a positive way. So even if a child doesn't necessarily succeed in meeting 3 new friends, being able to meet 1 friend, or even just being willing to go sit on the rug at library story time, as opposed to hanging on to mom's leg, that's a win. That's a success. And so when they begin to see that they can do that, then they're willing to take greater risks. So it perpetuates itself. This lines up with something we call growth mindset, and the idea that intelligence in all its different forms, emotional intelligence, social intelligence, academics, that all of those things can grow with effort and experiences. And so when we help our kids understand that it's the effort that makes the difference, their perception can change. It's not whether I succeeded or failed, but I can make growth. It's not necessarily that product, but the process of getting there.
Do you think that does perpetuate the sense of feeling like efforts are successful? Like, okay, maybe you went up on the stage and you performed a play and you forgot 3 words, but in the end, you were still successful. Like they've developed that skill, right? Because of those risks.
Absolutely. And so looking at where would I be if I didn't take that risk, and where am I now because I took that risk? And we know that the way we perceive those situations makes a big difference. If you think about brain chemistry, if our kids are super stressed, if we're super stressed, our body produces this hormone called cortisol. And when those get to high levels, it actually makes it difficult for our brains to consider the bigger picture. We become very narrow in our thinking. It's I just need to survive, and it puts us in survival mode. But when we look at the same situation and we go, my goal here is to make progress. It's like, I know if I try, I'm going to learn something. Then that cortisol goes down, and what begins to raise is dopamine. And we begin to see a reward as something positive. And because that dopamine increases, we're willing to try again. So it creates a change just even in our brain chemistry, as well as our mindset. And the two play together. So it does feed on each other.
It's a really interesting concept to think about, because you think about situations, maybe even personally for adults, where they've kind of trained themselves to panic in situations that are, stressful, and our bodies are going to react like you said. So then your brain does, you feel like when you're in a state like that, you can't see beyond the initial or that instant right then. So
it's like, I just need to be safe. So this is why we'll go back to that stage analogy. That kid's going to run off the stage. I'm not safe here. So when we think about, keeping our children safe, and we're talking, in the context of this COVID world, we got to be careful how we speak to our kids in the context of what we need to do to stay safe. But what is the tone of our voice when we do that? What is the our reasoning behind it, our motivation, and helping our kids understand that? Because we often assume our kids know our motivation, even though when we stop to think about that, our 5-year-old or our 10-year-old, how could they possibly understand what I, as an adult, am taking in and processing? And we make some assumptions about what our kids understand.
Yeah, and they do understand quite a bit, but probably not they can't read your mind yet.
Right. And they may draw the wrong conclusion for why you're doing something. I know, as my kids are all grown now, and it's really interesting to have conversations with them now about certain things that they picked up. That honestly, some I'm like, I never meant to communicate that. It's a little horrifying as a parent, and other things where I'm like, thank you, God, that's what you pulled from that situation, because I didn't feel like I was communicating very well in that. And so it really can go a couple ways. And so it's really important to really articulate that motivation behind for our kids as well.
So if we want to encourage our kids to take positive risks, and knowing that this is an intrinsic thing for them, how do we encourage them without interfering? And what are things we can do as parents to get them to take some of those risks, or even to look for the risks?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things I always think of when you think about this. One is you have to model it for your kids. You aren't a risk taker. Your kids are not going to be risk takers. I guess they could be, but it would be highly unlikely. So you need to ask yourself, am I showing my kids how to take positive risks? Am I verbalizing that? Am I saying, I'm really thinking about taking this new job, but I don't feel fully qualified for it, but I know I could do it and I could learn a lot. And I think I want to do that. If you have older kids, talking through that, and saying, I'm taking a risk here. This could change my career, my professional direction, but I'm going to take a chance on this. Or I'm going to take a chance on this friendship. I met this person and I think we could be friends, and I'm going to put myself out there and make a phone call and see if she wants to do coffee. So just even verbalizing and modeling that for our kids. Sometimes we want more for our kids than we want for ourselves. And that's hard to lead someone to a place that you yourself won't go. So you need to model it for your kids. And I think you need to really think about, how do you talk about taking risks or success and failure? The words matter You know, if your child comes and asks you, do you want to do something? My youngest, now grown, sophomore, I think he was in high school, when he came to me, he goes, I want to play baseball. And this kid had not hit a baseball since he hit it off a tee when he was 4. And I was like, okay, explain that to me. That surprises me, but I'm curious about why you want to do that now. That's a different conversation than what the other half of my brain was saying, but thankfully I kept it inside, was, you're going to look like a fool out there. These kids that they're playing they play every summer. They're playing AA. No, you don't want to do that. That's going to be awful, you know? So we have to think about how we talk to our kids about those risks and how to encourage them to share. What are they thinking and what makes them want to do that? I think secondly, we really need to think about, are we creating an environment for kids to be successful and to be independent? So when we think about risks, we can think about, my son playing baseball, but we can also think about the 2-year-old trying to put on his shoes. That's a risk. I can succeed or I can fail. And we, as at 2, when there's a failure, it's not pretty. There's that full out tantrum can take place. So, am I creating in the environment in my home where they can find their shoes when I send them to find their shoes? Are they able to get them on their feet? Are they able, am I putting things at a level and letting them try things, even at those earliest ages, to try to be independent so that they want to separate and do for themselves? So what is the environment that I'm creating in my home? Is it conducive to taking risks? Or am I pretty uptight about how things should be and when they should happen? And you're going to hear about it if you don't. That's a little hard to hear, but we've all been there and done that,
Yeah. I had this vision of making cookies at Christmas, or even, making cakes, whatever. And I always dreaded the flower part of the whole creation, because either somebody was wearing the flower, somebody was throwing the flower, we were walking through the flower, and there was stuff just everywhere that wasn't supposed to be, right? And then there was the hot oven, heaven forbid they burn themselves. There are just so many factors, but I had to just kind of put it aside and say, well, there's a broom, there's a cloth, they'll learn about taking care of things afterwards, but in the end, everybody's really happy because we've achieved something and produced.
Mm-hmm.
Now my 17-year-old is in the kitchen, and I watch her behind me just cooking away. And granted, we could work on some of our cleanup skills, but still she's confident. She feels good about what she's doing because we made a little mess when she was 5, and that's huge. So
it is huge. It is huge. And I think, just playing off what you said there, Dori, I think it's also important for us as parents to know where our comfort zone is. So in our early years, we homeschooled, right? And I had a neighbor who also happened to homeschool, and she was the messy one. Like, if you wanted to do an art creation, you went to her house. And if you wanted to do science, you came to my house. And we just had an arrangement. Yeah. You might think this was awful, but there was no Play-Doh, which is hard to imagine as a kindergarten teacher. But at that point, it wasn't a kindergarten teacher. It was like, I just carpet and Play-Doh, and oh no. So being able to know when you need to walk away, or if you've had an experience. Our oldest suffered a pretty severe burn when he was 3 years old and spent 2 weeks in a burn unit. And when I was younger, I was also in a house fire. Okay. So those 2 things combined made it really difficult when we took our kids camping. My stress, my cortisol went real high. But what I learned was, if I could walk away and let my husband, let the kids roast marshmallows, enjoy that fire, then it was much healthier for them not to feel my residual stress from that experience. Yeah. So sometimes we just really need to ask ourselves, why am I feeling this way in a situation? And how could I adjust to allow my kids to have that independence, take those risks, and have those experiences? It doesn't always have to be with us as the parent.
You know, I thought about driver's ed.
Yeah.
Not that if you have little kids, you're even remotely worried about driver's ed at this point, but as they get older, you're definitely going to worry about driver's ed. And my kids told me, I had one that didn't really like to drive with me because I would step on the floorboard so hard that the car would almost shake from me. And the other one that wanted to do all kinds of driving, and I was like, oh no, be careful, be careful. And you know, even with that, you know, it was practicing for them. They were confident enough that they believed in themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to just learn how to just let them do it. And it's hard at any age to not want to touch your kids, to not want to surround them with a huge bubble, to make sure that nothing bad happens to them. But then I'm reminded of, I think it was Nemo that said, but nothing will ever happen, right? If you, nothing's going to happen.
Nothing will happen, right?
And so some of those risks that even as parents that we have to take that are kind of positive risks are tricky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our kids aren't the only one taking the risks, right?
Yeah.
So I think like as we create a situation that allows them to take risks, we have to really watch them. You know, what are they gravitating toward? What are the things they really do want to do? And how do I need to adjust my behavior, whether sometimes it's walking away and letting someone else handle it or creating that situation. And then I think we have to really watch how we affirm kids in that process of taking those risks, making sure that we're affirming the process and not just the outcome. Be careful not to say things like, great job on that A on your math test. Great job. You got an A. Well, what's going to happen when they get a B? Is that not a great job?
Right.
So how do we flip that and say, you know, well done on putting in the work.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like it's paying off for you today.
Yeah.
And affirming that work piece, you know, and flipping that I'm so proud of you to you must be really proud of yourself. They want to know we're proud of them, but we want to make sure that they take their own internal pride, and it's not all dependent on making us as parents proud of them.
You know, thinking about it too, I think as parents, that will let us give them more freedom too, if we're not constantly looking for them to look to us to approve what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's a good perspective too for those of you that have older kids, because I think we still look for that a little bit. Like, aren't you excited that I'm proud of you? But really, they're already functioning on their own and doing their own thing, and they're confident, and they don't need us to be proud of them because they know how to do it. You know.
Yep. Yep.
So.
Yeah. And it starts with those young kids saying, "I do it. I do it." You know, there's a reason they're designed to do it. You know, to have that curiosity to try and make that effort. And too often, we squelch it, whether for convenience, our tight schedules, our fear, any number of things that we got to go back to the I do it more.
Yeah. Now, Sharon, I'm going to put a little plug in for you. I know you have the cognitive link, and I know that you have Feurenstien training. And so could you talk just a tiny bit about that? And so if people want to find out more, they can go to your link too. Or to your website.
Sure. So, you know, after years in the classroom, I developed this company called this business called the Cognitive Link. And what I do is I just help people grow in their thinking, whether you're a parent trying to help a child or an adult who's beginning to recognize that maybe your thinking isn't what you want it to be. And it could be because maybe you've suffered some type of medical trauma, chemo fog, maybe you've got long COVID, maybe you're struggling with some different things like that. And that would be, and that's what I do. And I do that through something called mediated learning, based in the work of Ruben Feurenstien. And so I'm on Facebook at The Cognitive Link, and I have a website at thecognitivlink.com where you can, you know, put in your information and get in touch with me, and we can talk about what specifically you might want to know or learn about how you can help your children begin to be more comfortable with taking those risks, and how maybe you as a parent can be more comfortable with them taking risks. And what does it mean to mediate learning or and help your child kind of access and understand the world around them. And so that's what I do. And I love what I do. It's great to see kids who are like moving from, I don't know, to I want a challenge. And that's what we want for our kids, right? We want them to just like engage and embrace the world and be their best selves. And that comes from taking challenges and taking those positive risks.
That is awesome. That is awesome. I think it's such a gift that you can do that for parents and for teachers to have that training as well. And so I really encourage people to check that out. So it's www.thecognitivelink.com, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. I'm going to do one little shameless plug too.
Oh, good. Good. I can't wait to hear.
Can you see that? Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
So, yay. So I have a book coming out myself. And I'm assuming you're going to have one eventually too, Sharon. That's why I said also.
Maybe.
Yes. Yes. So my book is called Little Cat and Dog's Birthday Bake, and it's a recipe for curing. It's coming out February 2nd, and you can learn more about it at www.dori, D-O-R-I, Durbin, D-U-R-B-I-N.com. So Sharon, thank you so much for your time. I hope people will look into you and just learn all they can, but most importantly, I hope that they allow their kids to take those positive risks and have a different perspective now.
Thanks so much, Dori. And I can't wait to read your book. I'm very excited about that.
Well, thank you. And bye, everybody. I hope you.
Right, thanks for joining, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.